Lively night, Baruch Hashem. Lots to be grateful for.
It's been quiet. I've not heard you.
Hey, we've been making a noise everywhere else besides for locally.
Didn't
Don't
hear
worry, we'll
it.
come outside your house and make a lot of noise if you want.
Yeah, I like it.
Very good. Fantastical. Okay, let's see what we've got here. Useful to get the PowerPoint up. If we can. There we go, we're starting that up. Let's leave this in. Welcome aboard, F5. Back to Zoom. Share screen. And we are winning. Okay. Okay, we're against the clock already because I only came on late myself, so apologies and thank you everyone for joining. We're going to jump right in and get started with the shir on this week's Parshah / Yom Tov, celebration, festival, festivities, uplift. I'm going to just do. And then we're going to do the 3 steps regular. We're going to start off with what happens this time of the year, what's going on the calendar. We're going to move right into from there to what's going on in the Parsha. And then we're going to look for a relevant practical Torah lesson for us. So first and foremost, what's going on right now in the Jewish calendar? It's Chanukah. It is Chanukah now. And the koiches, the energy, the excitement of Chanukah is Chanukah for a whole year. From Chanukah comes the koiches that Chanukah carries that are going to last us and carry us through from now all the way to Chanukah next year. It's an enormous opportunity, and it's an opportunity to cash in on this time. It happens to be that right now, out of all the days of Chanukah, we're up to the time of Chanukah, which is the Finif Lichtel, the 5th night of Chanukah. And the 5th night of Chanukah was always a special night. It was always a special night in Chassidus, or by the Rebbeim especially. And certainly the Rebbe made a big deal out of the 5th night of Chanukah, and there's different reasons why that would be the case. Starting off with, if you look at the menorah, there's more lit candles than unlit candles, which in English means there is more light than darkness. And that's tremendous. That's the tipping point. And it's important for us to cash in on that energy itself. In addition to that, there's additional darkness that the 5th night of Chanukah symbolically represents, which is the idea that the 5th night of Chanukah can never be on a Shabbos. Every other night of Chanukah can fall out on Shabbos, except for the Finif Lichtel, the 5th light of Chanukah. And the Finif Lichtel was always increasing emphasis on bringing light out of the darkness. So if it's a darkish kind of time, we make sure that most of the menorah is already lit, and we make sure it's the same way in our own personal life, in our avodah, in our service of Hashem. We try and do the same, that it should be a time where there is more light than darkness. So that's what's going on in the calendar. It happens to be that we're also rolling straight into Rosh Chodesh tomorrow night. A Rosh Chodesh of a new month. A special month, the month of Teves. It's a wintry kind of month. And it's a month that has Hey Teves in it, which we'll talk about next week. But also there's a lot of good things that are coming up. Rosh Chodesh in general is a good time. It's not just a Chodesh that begins. It's a Rosh. It's an opening to a Chodesh. And therefore, this time, we make special emphasis for Rosh Chodesh. So that's what's going on in the Jewish calendar. We're going to talk a little bit about the Parsha, and then we're going to look for a relevant practical message. I think I'll make a bracha because it'll make me concentrate better. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihya b'dvarei. Oh, l'chaim. So what's in Parshas Miketz? There's a beautiful sicha in Parshas Miketz. In Tafshin and Beis, the Rebbe says, you hear the name Miketz. So some words are like, you hear the name, like it automatically tells you and makes you think about a particular type of word. Well, you hear Miketz, if you're a chassid of the Rebbe, the first thing that pops into your head, Ketz means the end. And the Parsha talks about was the end of the time of 2 years of waiting, which Yosef was in the jail after he interpreted the dreams of the butler and the baker. So he's still languishing in jail another 2 years, making it 12 years in jail. It's a long time. But when you hear the word end, What comes to mind? Well, some of us think end of the day, fine, I can get to rest. Some of us hear the word end of Corona. For some of us, end means the end of Golus. That's the Rebbe. You hear the word end, Mikates, automatically is talking Geula. And tremendously, beautifully, the whole Parshas Mikates connects to Geula. Although Yosef is stuck in Mitzrayim, and it's in this week's Parsha where the brothers and the Shvatim start making their way down to Mitzrayim, and it seems like it's the beginning of Golus, but no. Actually, it's Mikates. It's a Parsha that's the beginning of Geula, and that's really what it's about. It's about being able to see Geula in every step of the way, in every step of the journey. Mikates. So whatever we're up to right now in our personal life, we're asking Hashem Mikates, it's time for a new beginning. It's time for the end of Golus. So this is the name of the Parsha. What's in the Parsha that the name of the Parsha is talking about? So it opens up, as we said, Yosef is still in jail. Last week he interpreted the dreams of the butler and the baker, telling him that the baker is going to get killed and the butler will be put back in his place. And this same butler, 2 years later, when Paro at the beginning of this Parsha has two dreams, one about the 7 fat cows and 70 skinny cows, and the skinny cows swallow the fat cows, but they still remain so sick and they look like they're going to fall apart, and they still don't look any better even after swallowing up the 7 fat cows. And then he wakes up, and then there's a second dream, the dream of the wheat stalks, and it's the same sort of idea where there's beaten out wheat, and then there's very healthy looking wheat, and the beaten up wheat swallowed the healthy wheat. And Paro is very troubled by the dream, and all the interpreters and all the different advisors are unable to satisfy Paro with a good interpretation. And that's when the butler remembers Yosef. He says to Paro, actually, there's this Jewish whatever stuck in one of the jails that actually was really good at translating dreams. Paro brings out Yosef, and Yosef gives the full interpretation, explains to him the 7 years of healthy, of good food, of plenty, and then they'll be followed by 7 years of famine that will be so strong a famine, they will swallow up the entire goodness that anyone remembers from their good years of plenty, and then the Mitzrayim will be in such a deep trouble that you won't even be able to remember that there were good years beforehand. And then Yosef says, actually, part of the dream is how to make it cope, how to make it work. Part of the dream is that Hashem is telling Paro that it's coming, and therefore you should start now preparing for these 7 years of famine, and that way you won't get stuck. And so that's exactly what Paro does. He appoints none other than Yosef himself as the leader of this project. And Yosef is taking care of the project to be able to...
Yeah. It's working now. He was a bit late.
Yeah, I was a bit late. That's correct. And there was the 7 years of plenty. Yosef was building stockpiles of food. And those stockpiles of food were cleverly designed so that they would be able to survive the years, the time that would be needed in order for this food not to go moldy, get rotten, but also that the animals and it shouldn't get ruined. It shouldn't get ruined by mice or whatever else it is. Yosef cleverly built storehouses that were able to handle it. And then the 7 years of famine came, and this is where the story takes us back to Yaakov Avinu, that Yaakov Avinu was hungry. There was no food to be had. When there was no food to be had, he has to go down to Mitzrayim because he hears that there's food down in Mitzrayim. And this is where the boys go down to Egypt, and they make a plan to not look too obvious. But lo and behold, Yosef recognizes them, and he starts taking them through a very, very difficult trip. And he makes it really challenging for them. What's he doing? Yosef is setting them up for an opportunity for teshuvah. Teshuvah, as the Rambam writes, the only way to do proper teshuvah is if a person is faced with the same challenge, under similar circumstances, and withstands the challenge. That's when teshuvah is full. And Yosef created for them exactly that. You've got to remember that Yosef was the son of the beloved wife, the original wife of Rachel. She wasn't original in the first marriage, but she was the woman who Yaakov originally intended to marry. And she had 2 sons. Well, she had passed away. And now Yosef was the one who they sold into slavery. And this was Yosef setting them up for a final chance to see whether they would be disinterested in saving Rachel's dynasty, Rachel's family, whether they would stand up for Binyamin, or be happy to get rid of Binyamin, which is the same reason they would try to get rid of Yosef. And Yosef made it very easy for them because they had to do nothing to let Binyamin get ruined. If Binyamin would have just left to his own devices, he would have ended up being a slave in Mitzrayim. He was framed. He had himself to blame in their mind. And here was the chance whether Yehuda and the brothers would just turn a blind eye or do what they actually did when Yosef framed Binyamin by implanting his personal goblet in his bags. He then stood up and told Yosef that he's willing to do everything it takes, even risking his own life, staying as a slave for the rest of his life, that he would rather do that than allow even Binyamin to be distant. And this is the specialty of the Yosef plan. Yosef HaTzadik ignores his own personal hurt, ignores his own personal pain, and instead focuses on what is best for his brothers. What do his brothers need from him right now? What would Hashem want him to do? And that was his only focus. Tremendous. So in order to do that, as the boys come, he starts accusing them as spies. He holds back Shimon and hostage and tells them, go back to your parents, bring that 11th brother of yours that you're talking about, and when you bring him, then I'll trust you're not spies. And they go back, and Yaakov says, oh, what have you done to me? I don't want to let Binyamin out of sight. I've lost Rachel already, and Yosef's not around. All I have left is Binyamin. Please don't do this to me. And as time goes by, Yaakov realizes he has no choice. They're starving, and there's only food to be gotten down in Mitzrayim, and that's why Yaakov agrees to be Yehuda's suggestion that he will personally take responsibility. And they go down, and as we said, Yosef sees them, they make a whole party together. Unbeknownst to the 11 boys, it was the first time that all 12 of them sat around the table together, and perhaps not only for 22 years, but perhaps for more years, because I don't know how many times they would have sat around the same table friendly. But here they were sitting around the table, Yosef dressed up as an Egyptian, all the other 11 boys all around the same table. They had a feast together, and then Yosef has to go back to his plan. And he sends them off, and of course he packs the money back in. He says, I don't need that guy's money, let them have it. But he has to put the goblet, his personal item, inside Binyamin's pack. And as they start riding, as soon as they leave town, he sends his henchmen, he sends his soldiers to chase them. Framed, caught, arrested. Binyamin is brought back in chains down to Mitzrayim, and all the brothers follow back. Tremendous. The teshuvah was at its peak. Not a single one of them deserted Binyamin. Every single one of them came back. And Yehuda, who was the culprit for the idea to sell Yosef into slavery, it now made a full 360. Full teshuvah is now demanding from Yosef. And he's saying, I don't care what it takes. I'll go the nice way and be a slave. But if you don't, we're going to war. And even if it means that I'll lose the war, I will not go back to father quietly without Binyamin, because come what may, we have changed our ways. But that's next week's Parshah. This week's Parshah ends in a cliffhanger that Yosef has taken Binyamin back into custody, and Yehuda is following behind, ready for whatever it takes. That's what's going on in the Parshah. Amazing. Tremendous lessons in so many different ways from this week's Parshah. So let's say l'chaim. And let's look for a relevant message. But believe it or not, we're not going to take a message from the Parshah right now. Instead, we are going to take a sikha, a lesson that comes from Chanukah, a Chanukah lesson. And this Chanukah lesson is what we're going to focus on now for the next, whatever long we manage to make it, hopefully half an hour or so. And then we can take some questions. We don't usually manage to do that, but at least that's the game. That's the aim. Okay? Yeah, we're going to just mute this little one. Okay. We're going to go along some Chanukah slides just to keep it exciting. Chanukah has already begun. This is Wednesday night. Join along from your computer, sharethelight.uk, 5 p.m. Virtual Chanukah celebration from across the UK. Tremendous, tremendous, beautiful event. Some really great entertainment. And if you have any children, grandchildren, or anyone who likes to make a nice design, they are literally giving away a PS5. PS5 only just came out. And this PS5 is going to be the grand gift for the guy, the person, the child who makes the most creative menorah. It's free to sign up. Sharethelight.uk if they want to send a menorah and have a chance to win that fantastic piece of equipment that can distract you for the rest of your life. Okay, this has been already. Drive-ins are still happening. The Chanukah truck is making its rounds. And of course, if you know somebody that doesn't have a Chanukah menorah, be an ambassador of light. Share that light. Let us know and we'll try and get them a Chanukah kit or deliver it yourself. And of course, make sure that everyone is celebrating Chanukah as much as you can. Help it. Okay, let's get right into the Sikha. The title for tonight: Every victory is worth celebrating. You don't have to win the war, so concentrate on the battle. Important. What's the difference between a war and a battle? A war is made up of many battles. And what we're learning here is that although the overall war is still ongoing and it hasn't been won, make sure to celebrate every victory, every little battle that we win. Now, of course, you can imagine this Chanukah lesson is not only going to be about the major victories of Chanukah, which is a global, national Yiddishkeit win. We're talking, obviously, in Avodah, personal service of Hashem, our own war. And what we're telling ourselves is we are trying to get to a destination to win the war. But along the way, we must make sure to celebrate every win of every battle and concentrate on it that way, and that way we could win. Here is the basic question that, the truth is, I heard this from a mashpia who shared this out of Fabrengen, who was an interesting, not your average type of bachram Fabrengen, it was a great Fabrengen, in which he shared this question. He said, ask your average serious person who's working hard on themselves. I'm not talking people about people who don't care. I'm talking about people who take themselves seriously, take the responsibility seriously. Ask them, and you can do this for yourself, to name 5 recent achievements. Recent can mean in the last week, 2 weeks to a month. Name the 5 recent achievements that you have. Don't say this out loud, but think in your mind 5 recent achievements. And what's amazing is that if you ask someone to share 5 achievements, what tends to happen is they say, I have this achievement, but that's not really an achievement because look, this and that and the other. Have this, no, but that's not really an achievement because really and before you know it, every achievement that we list, we try and shoot it down. If you're not sure whether this applies to you, think of your average Yiddish mama. Whoops. Your average Jewish mother, you ask them, are you a good parent? Me, a good parent? I try, I wish, but I'm so terrible. You speak to them for 5 minutes. They're already telling you how bad of a parent you are. That's what's on their mind. Not because they don't care or because they're not doing well, because they're trying to be even better than they are already. And it's just strange that we have this natural tendency to discount, to downplay our personal progress. I've personally seen this many, many times when I speak to somebody about their Yiddishkeit, their observance, their mitzvahs that they're doing. You ask someone, what a wonderful Jew you are. Look how well you've done. You've done a mitzvah of Chanukah. Fantastic. And the almost automatic response is, Me, I'm not a good Jew, I'm a bad Jew. I haven't done this, I haven't done that. What happened? We just spoke about one mitzvah. You did very well. How did all of a sudden everything, all the downplayment, all the discounting surface to the top? Where does that come from? And what we're going to suggest is that Chanukah teaches us that that is unhealthy. Not only it's unhealthy, it's unholy. It's not a good thing. It's a Yetzer Hara trick. It's a Yetzer Hara trick that tries to self-sabotage. It tries to make us play ourselves down. The net result is, after I finish bashing or beating myself up, I'm not better positioned to be more active and do more. The other way around. I feel like everything I'm doing and all of my achievements are worth less, if not worthless. And that is certainly a Yetzer Hara trick. And we're going to learn that the Chanukah story teaches a very interesting set of halachas. And the Rebbe takes these halachas and tells us that these halachas are teaching us a vital strategy in overcoming our Yetzer Hara. Remember, we've said the Yetzer Hara is anxiety, worry, feeling sad, feeling down or low about ourselves. This is 21st century state of the art Yetzer Hara. It's so common. It's so all over the place. But it's such a Yetzer Hara. It's so unideal. I was going to say non-Jewish, but you know what? So many of our Yiddish is such a Yiddish problem. But it's so not the way to go. And we want to talk about today, we are the winners. We're celebrating Chanukah. This is what we're doing now. We're lighting menorahs. We're sharing lights. We're excited. We play dreidel. We eat donuts or we don't eat donuts, whatever it is. We're donating somehow. We're doing Chanukah. We've got to be stronger. We've got to be Maccabees. And Maccabees do not let the Yetzer Hara tear us down. We can't. Not only we can't, we don't want to. We're much better than that. We deserve much better than that. We're not going to shoot ourselves down. Instead, we're going to be able to show that we celebrate every step of the way, all the good things that we're doing without the need to discount, without the need to bash, to bring ourselves down. Instead, we say, whoa, Baruch Hashem, let's do more. Let's do even more. And we're doing well. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn an interesting observation about Chanukah. And after we finish that observation about Chanukah, we'll move on from there. So l'chaim to this. Let's learn a Sikha. So the Sikha asks the famous question, which is brought down in the Gemara. Why do we celebrate Chanukah? What is the celebration of Chanukah all about? Anybody help me? What is the celebration of Chanukah all about? You can unmute yourselves. You can chat. You can let me know what you think we're celebrating.
The miracle of the oil.
Miracle of the oil. We're doing well. Anyone else?
Spreading the light of
Goodness. Spreading the light. We're sharing light. We're doing well. So we're celebrating the miracle of oil, and that teaches us to share light. What else are we celebrating? Help me out. Anyone want to add to that?
We won the battle against those that wished us not to observe our religion.
Wow. Spot on. We won the battle over those who tried to stop us from keeping our Yiddishkeit. And it was a tremendous miracle that we managed to win the battle. Okay, we have a lot of celebration reasons right here already. If you weren't sure whether to celebrate or not, so you've already learned right now, it's a good idea to celebrate Chanukah. But here's an interesting Gemara. And this Gemara, the Rebbe brings down in the Sikha, it's very interesting. What's interesting about it is because it basically asks the question we just asked. There is no tractate on Chanukah. There's no Masechtas Chanukah. But in Masechtas Shabbos, Talmud Tractate Shabbos 21b, the Gemara asks the question, "My Chanukah." What is Chanukah? The Gemara answers the question that sages taught on the 25th of Kislev, there are 8 days of Chanukah. One may not eulogize on them, and one may not fast on them. Because when the Greeks entered the sanctuary, they defiled all the oil that was in the sanctuary. When the Hashmonai, Nazmaniah, and our monarchy overcame them and emerged victorious, they searched and found only one jug of oil with the high priest's seal remaining. There was sufficient oil there to light the menorah only for 1 day. a miracle occurred and they lit from the one jug for 8 days. The next year, the sages instituted those days and made them holidays with recitation of Hallel and special thanksgiving. That is the Gemara. Great question. Great answer. Why is there Chanukah? What is Chanukah about? There was the miracle of the oil, that they were able to light the menorah for 8 days instead of just the one day, and it miraculously lasted until there was enough time to get more. And for that, every year we celebrate them as holidays with Hallel and special thanksgiving. Now here's the question. When the Gemara asks, what is Chanukah? Is that a question of, why do we even light the menorah? Why are we even celebrating? Or is that a question of, why are there 8 days of Chanukah? We know why there's Chanukah, but why is there 8 days of Chanukah? Because usually a Yom Tov lasts a day. How long does Sukkot last? Pesach lasts, well, those are 8 days, but the main Yom Tov, the festive day, is 1 day in Israel, in Eretz Yisrael. Shavuos is 1 day, Rosh Hashanah is a 2-day stretch. Most days have a 1-day celebration. Sometimes it gets extended. But why do we have 8 days of Chanukah? And for this, the Gemara talks about the 8 days that the lights miraculously lasted. Because if it's just a simple miracle, 1 day would be enough. So there are different ways to learn this Gemara. What would you say? Which is the Gemara's question? Why is there Chanukah in the first place? Or why 8 days?
Why 8 days?
Why 8 days? Anyone else? What would you say to the Gemara?
It says, what is Hanukkah? So it wants an explanation of Hanukkah rather than anything specific.
Okay, so we've got two opinions. Why the 8 days? And what does Chanukah means? What is Chanukah? Let's have a look what Rashi says. And don't forget, Rashi is your friend. Rashi is your first basic commentary on the Chumash and on the Gemara. So let's see what Rashi says. Says Rashi, if we can make it work, this is Rashi right there. What is Chanukah meaning? On account of which miracle did they establish the holiday? So Rashi is voting that the Gemara's question is extremely general. We don't know anything about Chanukah. We know nothing. We know nothing about Chanukah, what it's all about. It's interesting because this is in Tractate Shabbos. And the Gemara on Shabbos, Masechet Shabbos, starts off with asking also a similar kind of idea. Very detailed question about Shabbos. But it doesn't ask, how do you keep Shabbos? It doesn't say, how do you do Shabbos? Shabbos is assumed to be known. You've got to keep Shabbos. It starts talking about what is called carrying, transferring, and what's not. Because it assumes that the mitzvahs that are already in practice are known. It's the details that need to be ironed out. So here, Rashi is saying this is not the case by Chanukah. Chanukah, the Gemara is asking from the beginning. What is Chanukah in the first place? What is Chanukah all about? But that's Rashi. We're going to learn now that there are differences of opinion. Because Rashi seems to be saying that Chanukah, and the entire reason for Chanukah, is, as the Gemara says, just a miracle of oil. That's what the miracle of Chanukah is about. We're going to learn that there's opinions that differ, that argue. Starting off with the Rambam. And the Rambam writes very clearly that actually there's two parts to the Chanukah miracle. In the first section, he writes all about the very difficult war. You've got to imagine it wasn't just a power struggle, who's going to be in control. For many, many years, 200 years, the Jewish people came back from exile and built the second Beis HaMikdash with Ezra. They did not have Jewish sovereignty. They did not have Jewish kings. They had their own little jurisdiction where they could run the place, but they were answerable to the local or the regional king. The empire, whichever empire was in control, it changed hands. And the Jewish people kind of accepted that up until the Chanukah story, at which point it became unbearable. So unbearable, because the taxes were going through the roof. More importantly, because the Jewish people lost control over themselves. Their Judaism were being threatened, their ability to serve and worship, and also their personal life. The Syrian Greeks were taking whatever they wanted. And unfortunately, as it says here in the Talmud, including their own daughters, their own children. The Greeks were taking and literally terrible situation. And of course, the Yiddishkeit was suffering the most, and the Maccabees, the Hashmonaim, gathered together and against all odds managed to defeat the Greek army. And that was the first miracle. That was the first nace of Chanukah. Says the Rambam, there was another nace. When they finally managed to come back to the Beis HaMikdash, they had another nace. The 25th day of Kislev, they found a small jug of pure oil, and that lasted for 8 days, and that was a second miracle. And that second miracle was the miracle that took place when they already won the victory of the war, says the Rambam. And because of these both miracles, the miracle of the war plus the miracle of the oil, we make a mitzvah and a Yom Tov, a festival of Chanukah. And it's this time, these days are called Chanukah. It's forbidden to eulogize and fast them as in the days of Purim. Lighting the candles on these days is a rabbinic mitzvah, like the reading of the Megillah. Oh, 1 second. Also, it should be commemorated days of happiness and praise of God. Okay. So we have...
Sorry, what does eulogize mean in this context?
It means that if someone passes away, we don't make a eulogy. So we don't extend the mourning.
Okay.
So we have here two general schools of thought. One is the school of thought that is... sorry, I'm just muting because we're getting back. What is the reason for Chanukah? We have two opinions. One is the Rashi and one is the Rambam. Rashi writes that the reason of Chanukah is just the oil miracle. And Rambam writes that it's both, the oil plus the military victory. Now, it seems very insignificant that what's the miracle. The bottom line is you got a holiday, you got a Yom Tov. So what's the practical difference, what it is that we're celebrating? The main thing is that we have to do menorah. We have to celebrate and eat donuts or not eat donuts. And we have to make sure to do Hallel and be joyful. What's the difference? What the reason is? And the answer is it does make a difference. And there's a practical difference. And it becomes a halachic debate. These two schools of thought are going to debate whether or not it's a mitzvah to have a festive meal. Is it a mitzvah to have a sit down and eat a good Suda? Now think about it. When it comes to Pesach, you got to have a meal. When it comes to Sukkot, you got to have a meal. When it comes to Shavuos, you got to have a meal. When it comes to Shabbos, you got to have a meal. When it comes to Purim, it's one of the 4 mitzvahs. You got to have a feast. Do we need to have a feast on Chanukah? Yes or no? Anyone, help me out. Do we need to have a feast on Chanukah?
No.
No. Anyone else? Anyone want to argue, agree, add, or disagree?
Agree.
Agree? Okay. Got two up, 2 points on the one team, on the red team, on the blue team. Okay, well, looks like we've got a unanimous vote. All those voters have voted that there is no feasting on Chanukah. We're going to revisit that, but you're not wrong. You're absolutely on a good track. You certainly have company amongst the Rishonim. But in addition to that,
we're still supposed to have the fried foods and the milchik, so there's definitely an element of some type of...
Absolutely. Please do not take away no donuts. Absolutely, yes. They're supposed to have fried food and milchik food. Correct, well said. So we're going to talk about whether it has to be a feast or not. And I think that between everybody, we've kept on the straight and narrow. We've got the right answer the whole way through, which is great. I like when that happens. But first, let's see what the Torah says. The Torah writes, in the name of Rameh Rothenberg, or Rameh of Rothenberg would say, that the many feasts some stage during the days of Chanukah are only optional. There is no mitzvah to serve a special Chanukah meal, since a holiday was not established as one of feasting and drinking, but rather one of thanksgiving and praise alone. So what is part of the mitzvah and what is not? What is part of the mitzvah is to halal v'hida'ah, to be joyful, to say special praise to Hashem, and say thank you to Hashem. What's not part of the mitzvah is to start having food and party and whatever. That's nice. You can do it. No problem. No one's going to stop you. But that's not part of the mitzvah. Some stage, some sort of celebration, such sort of feasting. Says the Torah, nah, no need. Comes along the Bach, right there, and the Bach says, hold on 1 second, slow down there. As a matter of law, I tend to disagree with the Rambam Rothenburg, the Mayor of Rothenburg, in so much as the custom of eating festive meals on Chanukah is already widespread and has been supported by the great rabbis of the previous generations, referring to the Rishonim. The Maharshal also writes that the Rambam implies as such by describing Chanukah as being days of joy, not just days of praise. Rabbi Shalom of Austria writes explicitly that on Chanukah one should be joyous and partake in festive meals. So here you have it. The Torah says there's no need, and the Bach says one should. You're doing already. This is halacha, down to the halacha. And actually we're going to learn that this ties straight into the machlokus, the two opinions that we have, Rashi versus the Rambam. Is the military victory part of the equation or not? And the way we're going to explain it is that you have some Yom Tovs, some Yom Tovim in our calendar are purely physical, material, worldly wins. The fact that Paro will no longer beat us up, that's Pesach. The fact that on Rosh Hashanah we have a new year, that's an exciting start from the day of creation of heaven and earth. And many other such celebrations. Purim, Haman tried to kill us and he couldn't kill us. We were saved, let's party. Then there are some Yom Tovim that are purely spiritual. Like Yom Kippur. Well, it's not Yom Tov, but Yom Kippur is a spiritual Yom Tov. There's no feasting on it because it's a day where it's all about the neshama. It's a day where we get teshuvah. It's a day we connect to Hashem. It's not about eating. It's about davening. It's about being in shul. It's about connecting to spiritual connections. The festival about spiritual light. There was plenty of oil when the Chashmonaim, when the Maccabees came into the Holy Beis Hamikdash. There was plenty of oil around. What they didn't have was holy oil. Oil that was still sealed, that was pure. And that's what they insisted in searching, and they only found the one cruise. And that's what Hashem made a nace, that the holy spiritual, the tar, pure oil should be able to last. That's a spiritual win. And that doesn't make sense to be fressing or be having food to celebrate the fact that our neshama was shining. Compare that to the war. The Jewish people were under tremendous oppression, agony. What was going on before the Maccabees managed to fight back? The Yidden had real tsaros. And when they won the war and they won the battle, that was a whole new beginning. It was freedom. And that was a tremendous miracle. But that miracle was a tangible physical miracle. And that sort of miracle does deserve a feast. To celebrate to Hashem by eating, by celebrating that our bodies, our tangible us, should be part of the simcha and should make sure to thank Hashem that we should feel it. We should be excited about it because this is what we were saved over. And there it does make sense to have a feast. So the Rambam would say that it's Yimei Misimcha, days of joy, because it's celebrating the victory of the war as well as the oil. But Rashi, who says that the miracle is all about the oil, and he reads the Gemara to be talking about what is Chanukah. It's not about what's the 8 days of Chanukah. We know nothing about Chanukah. Tell me, what's Chanukah? Chanukah is only about the oil. No feasting there. There's no food to celebrate a spiritual oil. But Rambam, he reads the Gemara and says, no, the Gemara is asking why 8 days. We know what Chanukah is. Everyone does Chanukah, just like everyone does Shabbos. You don't have to start from the beginning. You're talking to people who light the menorah. They know that something's going on. They just need to know why 8 days. Everyone knows that when you won a war and you were protected by Hashem and your parents tell you the story at the candle lighting and you tell it to your children, it doesn't need to be repeated in the Gemara. The Gemara just discusses why 8 days. Why we have such a beautiful long Yom Tov. And the answer to that is the miracle of the oil. This is how Rambam would explain his position. And the net difference, the bottom line is that according to Rambam, you want to be feasting. You want to be making sure that you have a latka oven with your family. You sit down, you have a special celebration, at least sometime during Chanukah, and do something special. Do we agree to Rambam or do we agree with Rashi? Let's take a vote. We're not asking you what you know or what you remember. What would you suggest? Based on what we've said until now, should we be encouraging feasting or not? Help me out. It's gone quiet.
Yes, if you're inviting me.
One more time.
I said, yes, if you're inviting me.
Oh, very good. Yes, if you're inviting me. I like that answer. Anyone else?
Yes, because whenever anything happens to the Jews, it's something happens, let's eat.
Let's celebrate properly. Why should we celebrate
Correct.
just in shore? Let's celebrate properly. I like it. I like it a lot. 100%.
So not
100%.
feasting for the sake of feasting, feasting for, you know, having something special in order to bring more simcha to the Yom Tov.
Like latkes. Only joking. Yes, 100%. Yes. We should be feasting about the Yom Tov rather than just fressing. Correct. But I mean, it's a good start once you have food. Afterwards, everything goes smoother. Yeah, but it's a good point. Anyone else want to join in? A vote?
It's also the specialness of the food. So it's like it says, love goes through the stomach. So it's really important to remember, you know, when you were little, you had your donuts for Chanukah and the latkes. And even when you're older, you still enjoy that feeling, you know, it gives you a warm feeling in your tummy.
Yes, 100%. 100%. Actually, as a matter of halacha, we're going to read what the Ramah writes. Ramosha Islish is the Ramah, the Ashkenaz. The many meals which we add on these days are voluntary meals, since the sages did not establish them as days of feasting and joy. So there's no chiyuv. That's the Mechaber. Says the Ramah, some say there is somewhat of a mitzvah to add meals, because the Mizbeach was rededicated during those days. The prevailing custom is to recite hymns and songs of praise during these Chanukah feasts, and then they are in any case considered Seudas mitzvah. If you have a latka oven, if you have a party for Chanukah, says the Ramah, it's a Seudas mitzvah. It's a mitzvah meal. Just imagine, it's not telling you have to, but it's a very good idea to at least somewhere along the line have a Chanukah party, and when you do, you should know it's a mitzvah meal. Okay? I think this is very much in line with what everyone was saying earlier, remembering what it is we're eating about, inviting all the special traditional foods, but it's not a mitzvah, it's not an obligation, it's not a chiyuv. Here's one interesting element though, and that is the war. Was this war really a material win, or was the war also about a spiritual war? And what do I mean by that? I mean to say that actually in the Chanukah story, it sounds like the Haman story, where the Jewish people were going to be wiped out in one day, or they were going to be wiped out by the Assyrian Greeks. Truth is, it's not quite exactly what happened. At that time, there was probably the majority of the Yiddish people who were Hellenists, majority of Jewish people who joined the Greeks, their philosophy, their way of life, and they not only didn't suffer, they were part of the instigators, but the Misyavnim, those Yiddish people who had joined the Greek philosophy had it fine. They weren't persecuted. They had no need to go to war. If anything, they were fighting the Maccabees. So really, the Maccabees weren't fighting to survive to escape their material threat. It was really a spiritual threat. They were fighting to be able to retain their Yiddishkeit. And in a sense, all of Chanukah, of course the lights, but even the battle, the war, was a spiritual battle. And bearing that in mind is where the Rebbe brings this whole idea into a very relevant part of our life. If you think about it, the Maccabees were fighting to be able to bring Yiddishkeit back to the Yid, to bring Judaism back to the Jew. so that we should once again feel proud and excited to daven to Hashem, to do Hashem's mitzvahs, to live a life of Yiddishkeit. And it was a tremendous challenge. If you were smart, if you were progressive, if you were a thinking person, you had even a stronger challenge at that time. Modern science was against religion of Yiddishkeit. And there were very big thinkers, way, way ahead of their time, who were these Greeks. And for the thinking class, the people who were educated, it was an even a bigger struggle to hold on to Yiddishkeit and ignore the questions and the laughing and the scoffing that the people had over Yiddishkeit. I mean, they're gone now, and Yidden are still around. But at the time, it was a real challenge. And it was such a challenge that the Maccabees went to war with them. I mean, the name Maccabees was chosen because Mi kamoicha ba'elim Hashem, we are who meet Hashem Elai. It was a war about holding on to Hashem's message. So really, the war was also a spiritual war. Now let's think about it. When they finished fighting that war and they had secured somewhat of a peaceful situation in Yerushalayim, the war that they were fighting was far from over. The Greek philosophy was still making major inroads and terrible impact on Yiddishkeit, and therefore they couldn't stop. They had to continue working very hard, and unfortunately, their very own sons weren't that righteous either. But the Hashmonaim won a battle. One step of the way they won. They won the battle of freedom from oppression. It wasn't what they were looking for because they still had to continue to liberate Yiddishkeit. But at least there was no oppression under their rule. And that's really the core of why Rashi says you can't celebrate the war, because the war is also a spiritual battle. And the spiritual war wasn't over. Yes, they managed to come back to the Beis Hamikdash. That's the miracle of the oil. But the battlefield, that's not over. That's not won yet. But the Rambam comes along and the halacha actually follows that we should try to still celebrate that battle by feasting. And as the Rebbe tells us, now more than ever, it's become so important to do exactly that. You could argue from today till tomorrow, the war's not over, and there's so many things that still need to be fixed up. And it's true. The war is far from over. But in the meantime, we must celebrate the victories at every little battle. Because if not, then we won't have what it takes to be ready for the next battle. Comes Chanukah, take out those latkes. Make a Yom Tov meal. No, call it a mitzvah meal. Call it a Sudas mitzvah. Because if you know it's not the full celebration, but it's important to celebrate every single victory, however small it is. And we are so good at downplaying, discounting our wins. Yes, as we said at the beginning, yes, someone, are you a good student? Are you a good mother? I'm not this bad. I'm such a bad person. I'm such a bad... Where does that come from? You know what the answer is? Yetzer hara. It's a real Yetzer hara. And the Yetzer hara is top of the line, state of the art. 21st century supreme. Not just worry, anxiety, feeling low, but self-sabotage. Tell myself that I'm a loser. Let's read how the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya. Alter Rebbe writes, beautiful. Let's get it up if we can. What's this slide? Great slide. People often mistake their actions for their personality. When considering success, we feel like fraud based on previous failure. Here says the Alter Rebbe is the key. It's in the Perik base of Tanya, Perik Test of Tanya, and the Alter Rebbe uses a beautiful mashal, analogy, to be able to help us understand where this mistake comes from. And the way the Alter Rebbe explains it is, how is it that a person who's taken themselves seriously, They work hard. They try to do the right thing. If you ask them, do you want to be good or do you want to be not good? They will tell you that they want to be good. But if you ask them, are you good? They'll say, no, I'm this, I'm that. Where does that come from? Says the Alter Rebbe, it's the Yetzer Hara. And what the Yetzer Hara tries to make us think is that we are the sum total of our choices. If I chose to do bad things, I'm a bad person. And if I never made a mistake, then I'm a good person. Does that make sense? If I chose to do bad things, then I'm a bad person. Says the Alter Rebbe, come with me. Let's learn the mashal. There's a small city that there's two kings waging war over that city, that town. Each one of these battling kings are trying to capture that city. And each one wants to gain control of the entire inhabitants and that everything should run according to this king's will, so that they obey him and all that he decrees on them. But guess what? That city is me. I am that city. And there are two kings that are trying to control me. Each one of those kings want me to behave their way. So it is with the two souls, the divine soul and the vitalizing animal soul, the biological soul that comes from Klippa. And they wage war against each other over the body and all its limbs. There's a godly soul and there's an animal soul. There's a self-centered soul and a selfless soul. And they're both battling over me. So who's the real me? The Rebbe tells us very clearly. The real me is my neshama. That's the real me. But there's a war, a fierce battle. And when I get it wrong, when I made a mistake, what that means is that this particular battle, the other side won the battle. It doesn't change who I am. It really doesn't. It's sad and it's frustrating when I don't win that war, when I lose a battle. But it doesn't change who I am. Says the Alter Rebbe in Perek Tes, please remind yourself. Remember that it's not who you are. That's what I have done. But who I am does not change by what I did or didn't do. I am still that same person who the Eibishter created. And there's a fierce battle still ongoing. Says the Alter Rebbe in Perek of Zayin, and he says it clearly. For this reason, no person should feel depressed, nor should his heart become exceedingly troubled, because though he may be engaged in this conflict for the rest of his days, perhaps it was for this very reason that he was created. The struggle is gold. It was this mission to continue to overcome evil. Whoops. Where did we go? We lost it. There we go. Here we are. Indeed, the rabbis of blessed memory have said, he who was passively abstained from committing a sin receives a reward as though he had performed a mitzvah. Consequently, says the Alter Rebbe, one ought to rejoice in controlling his thoughts just as he would have been performing an actual mitzvah. So a person's walking down the street and a thought enters their mind and she chooses to think about something else because it's not kosher. Says the Alter Rebbe, you should be rejoicing. You need to celebrate that. You need to celebrate that for so many reasons. First of all, because you have to understand that that's a mitzvah. That is a mitzvah. Number two, you've got to realize when you do a mitzvah, that is you and Hashem together. That's what mitzvahs do. Celebrate. Don't say, oh, big deal. There's so many other things I should fix up. No, don't say that. It's not healthy. Celebrate it. And most importantly, and this is probably one of the biggest things, the Alter Rebbe tells us, Beinani, this is what we're about. This is what we are about. Every little win, celebrate. And if we do, we'll be fueling ourselves to be able to overcome the next struggle. Instead of letting the Yetzer Hara win us over, we'll win the next struggle. How do we see this in Chanukah? Because on Chanukah, we celebrate freedom from oppression even though it was far from the end of the war. But it was one battle. It was one battle won. Make it into a celebration. Do not let that pass you by. It's so important to do that. Actions are so important. They don't make you less neshama or more neshama, but they give you fuel to celebrate. If I get it wrong, don't stop. I've got to make sure to fix it up. It hasn't changed who I am. When I get it right, oh boy, make sure to make it into a celebration. Get your donuts out, get whatever you want out, but make sure it's special. Make sure it's something that you can say, I'm so glad that Hashem gave me the koyach to win this one. I'm so much more confident now, and I'm sure I'll be able to win the next one also. Chanukah, shine, be a Maccabee. Be a Maccabee. Mi chamocha be'elam Hashem. And mi Hashem Elai is the call of the day. Let yourself shine. Be that candle that's going to bring light elsewhere. And how do we do that? Not by downplaying and discounting the good things we're doing, but by celebrating every goodness that we have, even if it's small. And when we can do it that way, we're now ready for a real Chanukah year. Man, we're on fire. And this is the idea. So as Hashem, we wish each and every one of you a lichtige Chanukah, a Chanukah year, and keep on doing the good things that you're doing. Don't be scared of darkness. Don't be scared to shine. And Hashem should give us the koyach to shine with peace of mind, in good health, in good spirit, and without worry, without anxiety, without feeling low or sorry for ourselves. Instead, to have what to celebrate more and more. Thank you for joining. And Be'ez Hashem next week, same time, same place, in Yerushalayim HaKodesh. If anyone has any questions or comments, please
Thank you very much.
unmute.
Thank
you very much.
Chanukah.
Thank you. Have a
You're
happy
welcome.
Hanukkah.
Take care.
Thank you.
Take care.